I drove through the quiet streets of my hometown, hands slick on the wheel. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting that same orange glow I remembered from high school football practices. It'd been 5 years, but this place hadn't changed. Not a single damn thing. The corner drugstore still had the same faded, open 24 hours sign, even though it closed at 10. Same beat-up gas station where I used to pump for tips. Same old pickup trucks parked crooked along Main Street. My name's Dean Norris. I'm 34, born and raised right here in Lewiston, Idaho. I've spent the last 15 years in the Air Force, most of them overseas. Got promoted faster than anyone expected, especially the people in that house I was pulling up to. In the back seat, behind a bag of tools and a half-crushed box of beef jerky, was my dress uniform, the one with the Air Force Eagle pinned on the shoulder. Colonel, at 34. Not too many of us make it that far, that young. Certainly not the kid they said wouldn't last past E4. My dad used to laugh when I talked about joining, said I'd be back in a year begging to work at the warehouse with him and Cody, said I'd never survive the structure, the orders, the discipline. Funny, considering structure was the only thing I ever craved in this family. The concrete of the driveway was still cracked from where Cody crashed his bike back in middle school. I remember patching it with Dad one summer, said we'd fix it for good when we got time. We never did. Mailbox still leaned sideways like it was giving up on the house. A bird had built a nest inside the slot. Typical. I put the car in park and sat there for a second. My heart thumped hard like it hadn't quite caught up with my brain. After 5 years away, you'd think I'd be excited. I wasn't. I was bracing myself. Inside that duffel bag in the trunk was more than just a uniform. It was the key to their future, and they didn't even know it. I was back for a reason. And it wasn't nostalgia. I was the government's top cybersecurity lead on the new Project Sentinel defense contract, a $1.3 billion federal program, the contract my father's company had spent the last 2 years chasing. And tomorrow, I'd walk into their quarterly strategy meeting as the military liaison with final approval authority. They had no clue. Mom didn't come out when I pulled in. No hug, no wave, just the sound of the screen door swinging open. "Dinner's in 20, she called, her voice thin and flat like it'd been practiced. "I hope you didn't eat on the road." That was it. No welcome home. No how was your drive. Just a warning that I better not be late for her meatloaf. I grabbed my bag from the back, slung it over my shoulder, and walked up the porch steps. The screen door creaked like always, same busted spring on the top hinge. I stepped inside. Same carpet, same crooked lamp in the corner. That hum from the old fridge in the kitchen was still there, louder than it had any right to be. Nothing had moved, like time had just frozen the day I left. "Shoes," Mom said without looking up from the stove. I kicked them off by the door, looked down. Still the same tan rug with that weird wine stain from the Thanksgiving Cody knocked over the gravy boat. "You're early," she added, stirring something in a glass dish. "Cody's flying in tonight. He's managing 12 people now. Can you believe it?" "Yeah," I said, trying to smile. "That's good for him." She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Shannon Murphy picked him personally for this project. Says he's got real vision." Shannon Murphy. That name again. CEO of Murphy Norris Solutions. The same company my dad started as a foreman. The same one now hanging by a thread, desperately chasing the Sentinel contract. And the woman who would be walking into a meeting tomorrow thinking she was about to get her project greenlit by some anonymous Air Force rep. That rep was me. I didn't say any of that. Just dropped my bag by the hall closet and glanced around the living room. Photos lined the mantel. Cody's graduation, Cody's wedding, Cody on a ski trip with his wife and her perfect teeth. Not a single picture of me past the age of 18. "Still stationed somewhere?" Mom asked casually. "Still working in systems," I said. She made a sound like that meant something unimpressive. "Well, at least you're doing all right. You look healthy." I nodded. My throat was dry. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or just the quiet. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they'd find out I wasn't just Dean, the son who'd gone off and gotten lost in some military office job. I was the man who could decide whether their company got its future or lost it completely. And tonight, I'd sit through dinner like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't about to flip their world upside down. I walked down the hallway toward my old room, the floorboards creaking in the exact same places they always had. Every step felt like rewinding a VHS tape, dusty, faded, and stuck on repeat. The door still had the keep out sticker Cody slapped on it when we were teenagers, thinking it was funny. I'd left it there. Now it just looked childish. The moment I stepped inside, it was like entering a dusty photograph. Nothing had changed. The same comforter I had in high school was stretched tight across the bed with that weird pattern of faded baseballs and bats. My Eagle Scout plaque hung crooked above the desk. Trophies from Little League sat in a row on the bookshelf, still gleaming like they meant something. But that's where the story ended, right at 18. No medals, no commissioning certificate, no photos in uniform. None of the articles that came out after my promotion, the ones I'd emailed them proudly. If I hadn't known better, I'd think I vanished right after senior year. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress groaned beneath me. I ran my fingers along the windowsill where I used to keep my ham radio, the one I saved up for with lawn mowing money. Back then, I thought maybe I'd be an engineer, or something with signals and satellites. I used to talk about it a lot. Cody had laughed and said nobody cared about that nerd stuff. A knock came at the doorframe. Mom, holding a pile of folded towels. "You've got clean ones in the closet, but I brought extra," she said, stepping in like she owned the room. Her eyes scanned the space and softened slightly. "We really should update in here. Maybe paint. It still looks like you're 15. I gave a short nod. Guess I never mattered enough past that. She blinked, clearly unsure if I was joking. She chose to ignore it. "Cody's bringing Danielle with him," she said, sitting the towels down. "She just made junior partner. Can you believe it? Corporate law. Works with some big firm in the city. Sounds like she's doing well." "She is. They both are." She paused, then added, "They just bought a new place. 4 bedrooms, backyard, whole thing. Makes me proud." I bet it did. I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. It had yellowed a bit over the years, and one of the glow-in-the-dark stars was peeling off. "Is Dad still working with the company?" I asked. "Oh, of course. He's still got pull there, you know. Everyone respects him, and Cody's kind of taking over the financial side, which is a big help. They're trying to impress Shannon with the direction it's all going in." "Shannon Murphy," I said. She turned toward me, eyebrows raised. "You know her?" I nodded slightly. "We've met." Huh. Small world. She didn't ask how. She never did. My job had always been this vague cloud of military stuff she didn't care to understand. There was a pause. She dusted a photo frame on the dresser like it needed urgent attention. "You still single?" she asked. "Yeah." She clucked her tongue softly. "You work too hard. You need someone to keep you grounded like Cody has with Danielle." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I think I'm all right." She left without another word, closing the door behind her. I stood up and walked over to the bookshelf. I pulled down a yearbook, flipped through it, stopped on a page with a team photo. There I was. Catcher, varsity team. My name in neat block letters under the image. But I'd done so much more since then. Saved lives, led teams, developed cyber defense systems that protected national infrastructure, built entire frameworks that classified contractors now depended on. Yet this house still saw me as the high school kid with good aim and average grades. I opened my duffel and looked at the crisp uniform inside, the eagle insignia glinting under the room's dim lamp. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that company conference, and they'd be forced to see all the parts of me they'd ignored for over a decade. The truth was, they never saw me as a failure. That would have required them to care enough to track my progress. No, to them, I was just the one who left, the one who didn't fit their mold. But that was about to change. The major defense contract their company was banking their future on, I held final authority over its execution. I was the man behind the curtain, and I was done pretending otherwise. The kitchen smelled like pot roast and sour judgment. I took a seat at the far end of the table while Mom hovered over the stove, barking instructions to Dad about the mashed potatoes. The dining room hadn't changed a bit. Same chipped plates, same clunky silverware that never quite matched, and the same heavy silence stretching between us like a second table no one sat at. Then the front door opened. "We're here." Cody's voice rang out like a trumpet. Always had that natural volume, like the world needed to hear him enter. Danielle followed behind him, hair perfect, heels tapping across the floor like she was walking into a courtroom. "Oh, sweetheart." Mom rushed to hug them both. "You look thinner. Are you eating enough? And Danielle, that coat is gorgeous." "It's Burberry," Danielle said like it was her last name. Cody spotted me and offered a quick nod. "Dean, Cody." I gave a half smile. "Been a while." Danielle kissed the air near my cheek. "Still in. What was it? Systems?" "Still am." We all sat down. Mom handed around dishes like it was Thanksgiving, even though nobody seemed particularly thankful. The small talk started immediately. Uh, Cody's job, Danielle's clients, the new espresso machine in their kitchen. And so Shannon Murphy handpicked Cody for this next project, Dad said, his chest puffing slightly. Said she saw leadership potential. Big things coming. "That right?" I asked, chewing slowly. "Oh, yeah," Cody jumped in, full grin. "It's a military-adjacent contract, big budget stuff. If we land it, we're basically guaranteed 5 years of growth. I'm running the pre-brief tomorrow." Danielle smiled, clearly proud. "He's been up every night this week working on the slides." Mom chimed in like she'd rehearsed it. "That's why he's flying back tonight. So dedicated. Did you know he's managing 12 people now?" 13, Cody corrected. I nodded. "That's impressive. What's the name of the project?" "Sentinel," Cody said, scooping potatoes onto his plate. "Cybersecurity infrastructure with defense applications. Half the execs don't even understand it, but Shannon trusts me to break it down." My fork paused in midair. "Sentinel?" "Yeah." He looked at me like I'd just misheard. "Why? You've heard of it?" "I've heard of it," I said. "Might be more familiar than you think." Dad raised his glass. "Cody's the future of that company. We always knew he had a head for this stuff." I forced a smile. "Of course." Then Mom looked at me for the first time since dinner started. "What about you, Dean? Still stationed somewhere, or did you get stuck again?" The words stung, even though I expected them. "I'm still in systems," I said calmly. "Doing all right." Cody leaned back. "You ever going to tell us what you actually do? Or is it all top secret hush-hush?" "Something like that." Danielle sipped her wine. "Well, thank you for your service, either way." It felt like a placeholder, like she just said, nice weather today, but for veterans. They talked for a while about the office politics at Cody's firm, about someone named Blake who got demoted, about bonuses. I nodded along, silent. The longer they talked, the more it felt like I wasn't part of the conversation, just a warm body in a chair. "You know," Cody said between bites, "if this contract lands, Shannon's talking about forming a new advisory board, strategy leads and all that. She's hinting I could be a part of it." "That's wonderful," Mom said, reaching for more wine. "We always knew you'd make it big." Then she turned to me. "And you, any plans? Or are you just taking it day by day?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "I've got a meeting tomorrow. Might be a big one." "Well, don't miss dinner," she said with a laugh, as if I was 13 again and grounded for missing curfew. I leaned back in my chair, looking at each of them. Dad glowing with pride, Mom sipping her wine like she earned a promotion herself, Cody basking in his pre-victory lap. None of them knew. They didn't know I was the final reviewer on Project Sentinel, that every bullet point Cody was rehearsing would land on my desk, that my recommendation could greenlight the contract or kill it. Cody was bragging about his new leadership role on a project I already controlled. He had no idea his little brother, the one who got stuck in systems, was the person Shannon Murphy reported to every week. So I smiled. I ate my dinner. I listened to them fawn over Cody like he was the next Steve Jobs. And I waited. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the desk jockey would become the man they all had to impress. That night, I lay in my old bed staring at the ceiling, where a few faded plastic stars still clung to the paint. I hadn't peeled them off when I moved out at 18. Back then, I thought maybe I'd come back someday and it'd still feel like home. It didn't. The mattress was too soft. The room smelled like dust and old paperbacks. Somewhere down the hall, the pipes rattled like they always had, and the fridge hummed like a broken motorbike. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My brain wouldn't let me rest. I kept hearing their voices at dinner, Mom's soft jabs, Cody's bragging, Dad's silence that always felt like a judgment. It wasn't what they said that got to me. It was what they didn't say, what they never said. They never asked what I'd done in 5 years. Never asked about my work or the team I led or how I'd managed to earn the fastest promotion track in Cyber Command history. I could have told them I briefed the Joint Chiefs last month, or that I'd been personally thanked by the Secretary of Defense, but none of that would have mattered to them, because to them, I'd stopped existing the day I chose something they didn't understand. I rolled over and grabbed my phone off the nightstand, opened the photos folder, scrolled through images of my team. Yvonne Grant in her flight jacket, grinning with a coffee in hand, our crew in Germany in front of a satellite station, the day I pinned on Colonel, the whole room standing and clapping. Even the crusty old two-star who'd once told me to slow down, son. I sent the picture to my parents when it happened. Never got a response. Back then, I used to think maybe the email didn't go through, or they were busy, or they didn't know what to say. But after tonight, I knew better. They didn't ignore it because they didn't get it. They ignored it because it wasn't Cody. I remembered the first time I told Dad I wanted to do ROTC in college instead of business. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I had the brochures spread out. He took one look at them and laughed. "You're going to trade spreadsheets for salutes?" he said, shaking his head. "Son, you think that's a future? Marching around and waiting for someone to tell you when to eat?" I told him it wasn't like that. That I wanted to work in cyber defense. He just waved me off. "You're smarter than that," he said. "Don't waste it." I should have known then that no matter what I did, I'd always be the disappointment. The only person who saw me for what I could be was Captain Yvonne Grant. She was my commanding officer at Langley. Hard ass, sharp as a blade, didn't hand out compliments unless you bled for them. She once pulled me aside after a 12-hour shift at the command center. I thought she was going to chew me out for overriding a comms protocol. Instead, she said, "You're different, Norris. In a good way. Don't try to be like them. Keep being different. That's what'll take you further." I think that was the first time I felt seen for who I really was. And now, at 34, I was a full-bird colonel in the Air Force with final authority on one of the most important cybersecurity contracts in the country. A project so classified, half the people in the room tomorrow wouldn't know how deep it ran. But my family, they still thought I fixed printers for a living. I sat up in bed, ran my hand through my hair, and let out a long breath. My chest felt tight, not from anger, at least not anymore, but from something heavier, something deeper. I had spent years climbing, building, proving, not to strangers, to them, to the people sitting 10 feet away down the hallway, still telling themselves Cody was the success story. But tomorrow, I wouldn't walk into that conference room as their son or their brother. I'd walk in as Colonel Dean Norris, United States Air Force, cybersecurity lead for Project Sentinel, the man who could greenlight or bury their future, and the man they'd spent a decade pretending didn't exist. The parking lot outside Norris Murphy Solutions was freshly paved, the kind of asphalt that shines when it's still dark out. I pulled into the reserved section marked Federal Contractor Visitor and killed the engine. For a second, I just sat there, my heartbeat steady, calm, focused. This was the moment. I stepped out of the car, polished black shoes landing clean on the concrete. The air was crisp, and I could see my reflection in the passenger window, full dress uniform, name tag straight, ribbons aligned, badge gleaming. Colonel Norris. It still felt strange sometimes, hearing the rank out loud. But today, I wore it like armor. A young woman in a blazer stood at the security desk inside, flipping through a clipboard when I walked in. She glanced up and froze. "Colonel Norris," she said, almost dropping her pen. "We weren't told you'd be attending in person. Last-minute decision," I said, offering a polite nod. I wanted to evaluate things up close. "Of course, sir. Please, right this way. The executive suite is prepped. Miss Murphy is on her way down." I followed her past the polished floors, the framed awards on the walls, the receptionist who gave me a double take as I passed. We reached the elevator just as it dinged open, and there he was, Cody. He was holding a tablet, thumb flicking through slides, lips moving as he rehearsed under his breath. When he looked up and saw me, he stopped cold. His eyes widened. "Dean," he said, voice pitching up. I gave him a nod, stepping into the elevator beside him. "What the hell are you doing in uniform?" he asked, half laughing, like it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. The doors slid shut. I didn't answer right away. Let him sit with it. "I thought you worked in, what did you call it? Systems," he asked again, quieter this time. I do, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Just on a much broader scale. He looked pale, like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. The elevator opened on the executive level. Before he could say another word, Shannon Murphy herself rounded the corner, flanked by two assistants. She smiled immediately when she saw me. Colonel Norris, she said warmly, extending her hand. It's an honor to have you here in person. Cody's jaw slackened. Shannon, I replied, shaking her hand. I appreciate the invitation. Your insight will be invaluable today. The team's eager to walk through the Sentinel proposal. We've made great progress since your last review. I nodded. Looking forward to it. Cody stepped forward, face flushed. Wait, he's the liaison? Shannon blinked. Yes, I mentioned that in the brief last month. Colonel Norris has final evaluation authority. But he's my brother. Shannon turned to look at him. Yes, he is, and one of the most respected cyber defense officers in the country. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Dad turned the corner then, coffee in hand. His expression was casual at first, until he saw me. His eyes scanned the uniform, the rank, the name tag. For a second, he just stood there. What is this? He asked, like he wasn't sure if he was awake. Morning, I said evenly. Didn't want to miss the meeting. He looked at Shannon, then at Cody, then back at me. You're the guy from the Pentagon? I'm the guy who's been reviewing your progress reports for 2 months, I said, and the one deciding whether your project gets funded. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down at the coffee like it might explain things. Cody's voice cracked. You've been reading my reports? I gave a small shrug. Evaluating them. He stepped back like I'd shoved him. You knew this whole time? I did. They had dismissed me as a desk jockey. Today, I was their evaluator. As we walked into the conference room, executives stood up from their seats. Everyone shook my hand. Everyone looked at my uniform. Everyone addressed me with Colonel. And for the first time in my life, my family saw me not as the kid who left, not as the disappointment, not as the one who took the wrong path. They saw me as the one in charge, the one who mattered, the one they never saw coming. The conference room was all glass and steel, clean lines, modern furniture, and a massive screen already glowing with the title slide, Project Sentinel, Executive Briefing. The long table was lined with leather chairs, all filled with senior managers, division leads, and executives adjusting ties and tapping pens. When Shannon walked in with me beside her, the room fell silent. She gestured to the front. Everyone, this is Colonel Dean Norris. He's the lead military liaison for Project Sentinel and the Pentagon's final evaluator on our submission. A few mouths parted, eyes shifted. A few people glanced down at their notes like they'd suddenly forgotten everything they'd prepared. Dad was already seated near the middle. His face was frozen, somewhere between pride and confusion. He gave a stiff nod, as if trying to reconcile the uniform in front of him with the kid who used to mow lawns for cash. Cody was seated at the head of the table, slides loaded up, his jaw clenched tight. We're honored to have you here, Colonel, one of the VPs said. Glad to be here, I replied, taking the empty chair to the side, right next to Shannon. The meeting started. Cody stood and walked to the screen, clicking through his first few slides. He still had that same confident rhythm he'd used since high school debates. The voice, the posture, it was all there. But I could see the cracks under the surface. He kept glancing at me, unsure whether to pitch hard or pull back. He was rattled. Project Sentinel, he began, is a scalable end-to-end cybersecurity solution aimed at bolstering critical infrastructure defense at the federal level. Our firm's approach emphasizes modular frameworks, seamless updates, and agile integration across military branches. It was a decent opener. Buzzwords landed. Heads nodded. I waited. Took notes. Watched how the others reacted. Slide after slide came and went. Supply chain mapping, proposed vendor pools, long-term scaling metrics. Cody was well rehearsed, but I knew what I was listening for. Real substance, not just style. About halfway through, I raised a hand. He paused. Yes, Colonel. In your third phase deployment timeline, you estimate full integration across airbase networks within 8 months. What metrics are you using to verify readiness on that scale? He blinked. Well, we're leveraging third-party validation through our DoD subcontractor. Which one? He looked at Shannon, then down at his tablet. I think it's Precision Nexus or maybe Sentry Logic. It's Sentry Logic, I said, keeping my tone neutral. but their current bandwidth wouldn't support full rollout without a 6-month lead time. That's assuming zero procurement delays. The room went still. Cody opened his mouth, closed it. I let it hang for a moment, then nodded. Continue. He tried, but the rhythm was gone. The next few slides were off. He fumbled a stat, misquoted a figure, skipped a bullet point entirely. The balance in the room had shifted. People weren't just watching him, they were watching me. Another hand shot up, someone from logistics. Actually, I'd like to revisit Colonel Norris's question on supply chain timelines. By the time Cody wrapped up, the illusion was gone. He was still their golden boy, but now he was standing next to someone who knew the guts of the project better than he did. Someone they hadn't seen coming. Someone they couldn't ignore. Shannon stood to close the meeting. I want to thank everyone for the hard work leading up to today, and especially Colonel Norris, whose insight and expertise will guide our next steps. Everyone looked at me again. Some nodded, others murmured appreciation. Dad's face was hard to read, something between awe and regret. Cody just sat there, expression blank, fingers wrapped tight around his stylus. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and offered a polite smile. It's been helpful to see the operation up close, I said. This will definitely factor into our assessment. What I didn't say, but everyone understood, was this: I was in control. Cody had once mocked military men like me, called us box checkers, government drones. Now, he needed mine to approve his future. And every person in that room saw it, saw the shift, saw what I'd become. The man who could finally speak in a room that never listened before. At exactly 11 a.m., I stepped into my father's office. I didn't knock. The place hadn't changed in years. Still smelled like old paper and pine-scented cleaner. Framed certificates lined the walls, all proudly showing Cody's milestones: MBA, Young Executive Award, a glossy shot of him shaking hands with Shannon Murphy. My name wasn't on anything, not even a photo. Dad was at his desk. Mom sat on the nearby love seat, legs crossed, fingers nervously tapping against a mug she probably didn't want. Cody was in the corner, arms folded, staring at the floor like it owed him something. I closed the door behind me. We need to talk. Dad cleared his throat. Yeah, I think we do. For a second, no one moved. Then he motioned toward the chair across from him. I stayed standing. Why didn't you tell us? He asked, not accusing, just confused, like he couldn't wrap his head around it. I stared at him. You never cared. His eyebrows pinched. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked, keeping my tone even. Every email, every ceremony, every time I tried to share something with you, I got silence. I sent you pictures when I made Captain, Major, Lieutenant Colonel. Hell, when I was promoted to full bird colonel, I sent you the photo and never heard a word. Mom set her mug down with a soft clink. We didn't know what to say. Or maybe you just didn't think it mattered, I said, looking at her now, because it wasn't Cody's promotion. Cody shifted, finally speaking. You seriously came back just to rub this in our faces? To embarrass us in front of Shannon? I came back to do my job, I said firmly. You wanted the title. I earned the responsibility. That's not fair. I'm not here for fairness, Cody. I'm here because you're pitching a government contract and I'm the one with the signature line. That's the reality. Dad leaned forward, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. I always thought the military was for people who didn't know what they wanted, he said quietly. I didn't see where it could take you. You didn't try to, I said. I wasn't the son you wanted. You wanted someone like Cody, corporate, clean-cut, easy to brag about. He looked up at me, his mouth tight. Apparently, I was wrong. That hung in the air for a beat. Cody scoffed. So what now? You get to lord it over us, show up in uniform, humiliate us in front of the board, and feel like you've won? I'm not here to win, I said. I'm here because this is what I've earned, every bit of it, and I've been doing it alone for a long time. Mom stood slowly. Dean, she started, her voice softer than it had been in years. No, I said, cutting her off. This isn't about guilt. This is about truth. You were proud of Cody before he'd done anything. I had to do everything just to be tolerated. She blinked, eyes glossy. That's not how we meant it. It's how it felt. Cody shoved his hands in his pockets. Well, congrats. You got your recognition. Happy now? I turned toward him. Recognition wasn't the goal. I don't need it from you. But you're going to understand something. This isn't your playground anymore. You don't get to coast off last names and charm. This contract has real consequences. You want to lead a division? Learn what it means to be accountable. He said nothing, just looked away. Then Dad stood up, walked around the desk, stared at me for a long second, then nodded once. I failed to see your accomplishments, he said, slow and deliberate, and I'm sorry. It caught me off guard more than I thought it would. He didn't say it like a man forced into it. He said it like someone who finally understood just how far he'd missed the mark. I nodded back. Thank you. We stood in that silence for a moment, all four of us in the same room for once. Really in it. Nothing else to hide behind. No bragging, no dismissal, just acknowledgement. Maybe it wasn't everything, but it was something. After years of being the invisible son, I finally stood in a space where they saw me. Not as the failure, not as the kid who left, but as the man who came back on his own terms and couldn't be ignored anymore. 6 months later, I was setting out glasses on my kitchen table in Arlington when the doorbell rang. It was the first time my family had ever visited me here. My place sat on the top floor of a quiet building with a view of the Potomac, not far from the Pentagon. Clean lines, gray walls, a couple of framed commendations on one side, and a massive aerial photo of Ramstein Air Base on the other. Nothing flashy, just mine. Dad walked in first, holding a flat wrap package. Mom followed with a foil-covered dish, and Cody brought up the rear, his hands awkwardly empty, like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "Smells good in here," Dad said, setting the frame on the counter. "Didn't expect a colonel to know how to cook." "Didn't expect a finance guy to show up empty-handed," I shot back, grinning just enough to let him know I meant it half as a joke. He chuckled. "Touché." Mom uncovered the dish. Apple pie. A little uneven on the top crust, but clearly homemade. "It's what you liked," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Thanks," I said. "It smells great." Cody hovered near the window, glancing at the framed unit citation on the wall. "So this is your base of operations, huh?" "Something like that." Dinner was quiet at first. Baked salmon, roasted potatoes, the pie warming in the oven. It wasn't until the second round of drinks that Dad pulled the frame from the counter and handed it to me. "I figured you might want this," he said. I opened it. "I'm here because you're pitching a government contract, and I'm the one with the signature line. That's the reality." Dad leaned forward, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. "I always thought the military was for people who didn't know what they wanted," he said quietly. "I didn't see where it could take you." "You didn't try to," I said. "I wasn't the son you wanted. You wanted someone like Cody, corporate, clean-cut, easy to brag about." He looked up at me, his mouth tight. "Apparently I was wrong." That hung in the air for a beat. Cody scoffed. "So what now? You get to lord it over us, show up in uniform, humiliate us in front of the board, and feel like you've won?" "I'm not here to win," I said. "I'm here because this is what I've earned, every bit of it, and I've been doing it alone for a long time." Mom stood slowly. "Dean," she started, her voice softer than it had been in years. "No," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't about guilt, this is about truth. You were proud of Cody before he'd done anything. I had to do everything just to be tolerated." She blinked, eyes glossy. "That's not how we meant it?" "It's how it felt." Cody shoved his hands in his pockets. "Well, congrats. You got your recognition. Happy now?" I turned toward him. "Recognition wasn't the goal. I don't need it from you. But you're going to understand something. This isn't your playground anymore. You don't get to coast off last names and charm. This contract has real consequences. You want to lead a division? Learn what it means to be accountable." He said nothing, just looked away. Then Dad stood up, walked around the desk, stared at me for a long second, then nodded once. "I failed to see your accomplishments," he said, slow and deliberate, "and I'm sorry." It caught me off guard more than I thought it would. He didn't say it like a man forced into it. He said it like someone who finally understood just how far he'd missed the mark. I nodded back. "Thank you." We stood in that silence for a moment, all four of us in the same room for once, really in it. Nothing else to hide behind. No bragging, no dismissal, just acknowledgement. Maybe it wasn't everything, but it was something. After years of being the invisible son, I finally stood in a space where they saw me, not as the failure, not as the kid who left, but as the man who came back on his own terms and couldn't be ignored anymore. 6 months later, I was setting out glasses on my kitchen table in Arlington when the doorbell rang. It was the first time my family had ever visited me here. My place sat on the top floor of a quiet building with a view of the Potomac, not far from the Pentagon. Clean lines, gray walls, a couple of framed commendations on one side, and a massive aerial photo of Ramstein Air Base on the other. Nothing flashy, just mine. Dad walked in first, holding a flat, wrapped package. Mom followed with a foil-covered dish, and Cody brought up the rear, his hands awkwardly empty like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "Smells good in here," Dad said, setting the frame on the counter. "Didn't expect a colonel to know how to cook." "Didn't expect a finance guy to show up empty-handed," I shot back, grinning just enough to let him know I meant it half as a joke. He chuckled. "Tiché?" Mom uncovered the dish. Apple pie. A little uneven on the top crust, but clearly homemade. "It's what you liked," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Thanks," I said. "It smells great." Cody hovered near the window, glancing at the framed unit citation on the wall. "So this is your base of operations, huh?" "Something like that." Dinner was quiet at first. Baked salmon, roasted potatoes, the pie warming in the oven. It wasn't until the second round of drinks that Dad pulled the frame from the counter and handed it to me. "I figured you might want this," he said. I opened it. It was a printed article from Defense Tech Quarterly, the one about Project Sentinel's successful deployment. My photo was front and center, me in uniform, arms crossed, standing in front of a server bay. Underneath was a quote I'd given about the importance of public-private partnerships in national cybersecurity. I hadn't even known they'd read it. "I saw it in the waiting room at the dentist," Dad said. "Made them give me an extra copy." I smiled. "Thanks." He looked around the room. "You've done well for yourself, Dean. More than well." Mom nodded, sipping from her wine glass. "We're proud of you." That word, I wasn't sure I'd ever hear it from her. Not like that. It landed heavier than I expected. Cody cleared his throat. I actually used your protocol last month. The Sentinel framework. Our team borrowed part of it for our internal audit." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Yeah?" He shrugged, suddenly sheepish. "It's pretty damn solid. Kind of made me realize how much I don't know." "That's most of us," I said. "It's a moving target." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't strained. Nobody was performing. Nobody trying to be louder or more impressive. Just four people eating dinner. A family. Or something close to it. Halfway through pie, I buzzed in a guest. When the door opened, General Yvonne Grant stepped inside, her presence still commanding even in casual clothes. My parents stood quickly, clearly surprised. "General," Dad said, extending a hand. "Retired now," she smiled, shaking it, "but still partial to pie and a good wine." Mom practically scrambled to fix her posture. "Would you like some coffee? Or tea?" "Coffee sounds great." Yvonne sat beside me, plate already in hand. She glanced around the room, then turned to my parents. "Your son," she said, "is the reason this country's infrastructure still stands." My dad blinked. "Well, we always knew he had potential." She laughed lightly. "No, not potential. Results. He's one of the sharpest minds I've ever had the privilege of mentoring, and one of the few who leads without needing the spotlight." The room went quiet. I looked down at my fork, then at Cody, who gave me a small nod. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't competitive. It was the kind of nod that said, "Yeah, okay. You earned this." And I had. For years, I chased recognition from a family that saw me as the one who walked away, who built something they never tried to understand. Now they sat at my table, eating my food, telling stories in a house I built from the ground up. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because I wanted to be seen finally as a man who mattered. And tonight, I was. After everyone left, the apartment felt bigger, too big. I stood out on the balcony, arms resting on the cool metal rail, looking out over the Potomac. The city lights shimmered in the water, car horns blipped far below, and a plane blinked its way toward Reagan National. Inside, the last of the wine glasses sat drying by the sink. Mom had offered to wash them, but I waved her off. Some things I preferred to do myself. On the wall behind me, the framed Defense Tech Quarterly article now hung next to my unit's citation plaque. It looked right there. Balanced. The past and the present side by side. Not competing, just existing together. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. There hadn't been applause, no dramatic movie ending, no sudden outpouring of apologies or big gestures. Just a dinner, some laughter, a pie, and quiet acknowledgments that used to feel impossible. And yet, something had shifted. Earlier that night, as they were putting on their coats, Cody had clapped me on the shoulder and said, half grinning, "Thanks for not nuking my proposal back in January, sir." He said it lightly, like a joke. But the pause before "sir" gave him away. It wasn't mockery. It was respect. And that mattered more than I thought it would. For so long, I'd tried to prove myself to them. To be louder, more successful, more impressive, just to get a sliver of the pride they handed Cody by default. But standing there now, watching the lights of DC buzz softly in the distance, I realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore. I already had my own. All the years I spent building, sacrificing, leading, that was for me. Not for recognition, not for validation, but for something deeper. Something real. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good, to finally be seen. To finally be understood, even if only a little. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and sat down on the couch. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional honk outside. I looked over at the plaque, then at the article. My father's handwriting was faint at the bottom of the frame. He'd scrawled, "Proud of you, son." It was the first time I'd ever seen those words written down, and maybe he wouldn't say them again. Maybe the next dinner would still come with awkward pauses and bragging about Cody's new accounts. Maybe some things wouldn't change at all. But I had changed. I wasn't trying to be the better son anymore. I was just trying to be a better man. And as the city lights flickered across my living room, I realized I didn't need to win anything tonight, because I already had. Respect, dignity, peace, the kind that doesn't shout but settles deep in your bones. Some victories don't come with applause, but they echo longer and louder, and they last.